How's everybody doing? It is 90 degrees out in Los Angeles right now. And it's November. That's something that I just don't get used to. My first couple years in Los Angeles, it really bothered me that there was no seasons. I think that's a common complaint for people. But now that I've been here for a while, it really doesn't bother me anymore. There's something about I don't know. I don't even know if I agree with what I'm saying sometimes. But I mean, I was gonna say, as like a songwriter or as a creative person, you spend a lot of time reflecting. I think humans do in general, but as a writer, it's like that's what you're supposed to do. Like I feel like I'm supposed to observe the world around me. That just feels like my purpose a little bit, is to observe the world and then tell stories through songs, or just, I don't know, just tell stories. I really like telling stories. And so, I don't even know where I was going with that. This is a powerful way to start a podcast, by the way. Just word vomiting into the microphone. What I was saying, though, is that it's warm out, and I'm okay with it, and I'm happy that it's warm out. It's nice to wake up and feel the warmth. It's a good way to start the day. So I wanted to talk about a story, a little bit about where I grew up. I grew up in a town called Maple Valley, which is, like 45 minutes outside of Seattle, closer to the Cascades, kind of like right at the foothills. And I grew up on some property. And when I say that, I don't mean like property that's out in Montana. I mean, we had 5 acres of property. My mom is a lavender farmer. And yeah, we had a ton of fruit trees on the property, the big forested area. Our closest neighbor is like multiple acres away. And it was an awesome way to grow up. It really was. I think I didn't realize it as much at the time, but I was always running through the forest, riding dirt bikes, playing with friends. And I think I've been reflecting on it a lot more recently because during the pandemic, I left Los Angeles and went back up to Washington for almost a year. And during that time, I spent a lot of time back at my parents' property. And one of the first things that happened when I got back into town after being in Los Angeles for a couple of years was I started like reminiscing on, my times as a kid and the things that I used to do, and, like having apple throwing fights with friends. Like that was a real thing that I did growing up. We would take the apples that had fallen off the trees, and they were real mushy. So when you threw them at someone, it didn't hurt. But when you would throw it, the apple would like explode when it hit them. And sometimes the apples would be a little bit harder and you'd get a good welt. But we did that a bunch. And that was always fun. That's what happens when you grow up out more in the boonies a little bit. You find ways to entertain yourself. And that kind of leads into the first song that I wrote once I got back to Washington. So backstory, pandemic hit, moved back to Seattle for a little while. I'm back in LA now. But when I arrived back into Washington, specifically Maple Valley, I had realized that my dad had cut down a tree on the property, and he had to do it. The tree was about to fall on top of our lower garage that's down in the property, and the tree had to come out. And it may have even fallen over from a windstorm, but regardless, I was looking at the stump of the tree, and I was thinking to myself of, the times when I used to climb that tree. It was a walnut tree. And I just started reflecting. Like, it was like all of these things started to flash in my head. I used to climb that tree all the time. And there was one time in particular, I was with my buddy, and we were climbing this tree, and I fell out of the tree and had this moment of pure terror as I landed on my back. And there was a whole bunch of rocks, like good sized rocks underneath the tree. And I hit the ground, and it felt like it was slow motion. And sometimes before something like that happens, it's almost like what's going to happen. The second before it happens, you're aware that, oh no, I just did something wrong, or you took the wrong step, or whatever it was. But for whatever reason, I came flying out of that tree, and it felt like slow motion, but I was cruising. When I hit the ground, here I am, a young kid, and my whole short little life flashed in front of my eyes. And I had never experienced anything like that. And it's funny because when you zoom out, that moment feels pretty insignificant, because it was just a kid climbing a tree. He fell out of the tree, and I survived it. I was okay. But I did get whiplash in that moment. And what I also got in that moment was, I think, this like understanding of fragility at a very young age of, whoa, wait a minute, did I almost just die? What happened? I had a really, really awesome childhood, and maybe that was the first experience of, whoa, bad things can happen if you're not super careful. And so as I'm, this was not too long ago, as I'm looking at this tree stump, that story comes to mind. And I start thinking about, like when I was in high school, it was always like, I think maybe it was even the yearbook, I don't remember, but of me saying like, I'm an old soul, and I've felt that way my whole life. And I know that that's kind of like a cliche thing to say. A lot of people maybe feel that way, but in my head, me being like an observer, and I always try and connect the dots, I connected the dots that maybe when I was 8 years old and I fell out of that tree, that's when I became an old soul. Maybe that was the moment where I understood how quickly things can disappear and go away, and how important life is, and how lucky we all are to be here in the first place. And this is as a young kid, right? So I didn't realize at the time that moment may have been the thing. And I don't know for sure. And it could have been a whole bunch of things. But for some reason, that moment stuck out to me and inspired my song, Old Soul, which I put out in an EP called Dusty Flares EP. And this song came out quick, right after I had that thought. And I was writing the song in the same place, on the same property that I had started a lot of my, first songs when I was a young kid. I started, I think I wrote my first song when I was probably 8 or 9. And so, yeah, I think, as a writer, there's so much to write about. And I'm still young. I still have a lot of life to live, but I think there's something fascinating about being able to observe what's going on in your own life. And this was 20 years ago that this happened to me. And it took me that long to then recognize the moment and say, wait a minute, I think I might have connected some dots here. And so that's where that song came from. And, I'm back in Los Angeles now, and I've kind of been on this search to write songs that make me feel, you know, that I love playing live, that I don't feel like I have to put on a show. I can just go up there and sing songs, and I don't feel like I have to fake anything. I don't feel like I have to be something that I'm not. A song like Old Soul, when I get to sing that on stage, I am so grateful that I get to sing that song, and I enjoy it. And I don't care if there's 5 people in the audience, 10, 100, 200. I mean, the more the better, obviously. My manager's like, no, more is better. We definitely need some more people. But for me, performing, it's about the music, and it's about connecting with people. And so, yeah, it's just, I'm grateful that song came out of that story. I'm grateful that I didn't fall out of that tree too hard. And I'm grateful that you guys are listening to it. And I hope you keep listening to it. I'll go ahead and stop there. My cat is in the background trying to knock over a glass off of my dining table, and I need to stop him before it hits the ground. So him and I are having a stare-off right now. One last thing I will say is that I just dropped new merch, and it's the Lost Recordings merch, and then also I put out some holiday merch. Both of these are sweatshirts that I designed myself. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I will catch you next time. All right, bye.
Ground up above, clouds below, hanging upside down, swinging in a walnut tree. And then I fell out, and the world began to freeze. On my way down, and I realized